kind of grabbing my like long #1 white sable and thinking about, I find with these like really sweepy, loopy lines that I like starting with a contour. I'm also going to grab my water container. This is just a plastic water bottle that I cut the top off of. I like using jars because they tend not to tip as fast, but I have all my jars filled up with flowers right now. Put this right here. I want you to get an idea of how often I'm actually putting my brush in the water to get the consistency of paint that I want to, so that it'll move around on what I'm looking at. I've noticed that people are tending maybe to not use as much water as they need at the start, and then their paint is giving them a hard time. I like starting my underpaintings dark and building light up on top. And I hope that you can see that this mixture is pretty watery. I don't want to grab the really thick paint over here and start doing my lines with that, because that just gives me, that limits my options of how the paint moves around. So I do spend quite a bit of time of like kind of getting it to be a more watery texture. And so I'm looking at my box. I'm thinking about where I want to place that in the parameters of this paper and how the leaves are gonna fit. And I'm measuring with my hands and eyes. If the box is this big, the plant's actually twice as big. So I'm thinking about those things as before I frame it, and I even do this thing, especially if you aren't all watching, where I sit there for 5 minutes, depending on how complicated the thing I'm looking at, and I go like this and make invisible lines to get a sense of how it's going to fit into the sweep of the paper. Because if I have a leaf up here that I want in the picture, then I need to think about how it sweeps down, comes across, and hits this box. If I put the box in the middle of the page, half my plant's going to be off here to the right. So there's these little things that are going on in my mind that I'm not really even conscious of, just because making things like this has become habitual. So, and then as far as the perspective on the box, I do this thing with my brush where I line that up and I hold it against the page, because it's almost vertical or straight up and down, but slightly tipped from what I'm looking at. In the camera, it looks pretty parallel to the edge of the page. But when I'm looking at it from my hand, there's this going on. It goes slightly in. And then on this side, also pretty parallel with the page. This, parallel with the bottom of the page. This piece, parallel with the top. So this angle here on the corner becomes kind of important how I dress it. I can't see the side of the box from where I'm sitting. I can only see the front. So we'll see how that goes. That's like a little bit of a tricky foreshortening in perspective. If I close one eye, it's parallel. If I close my right eye, the line comes in. So I'm just going to have it come in very slightly. And now I'm going to be going into contour line. there's a lip around my box too that seems kind of important to how it reads when I'm drawing it, because it changes how this bottom part appears. And I just noticed a little bit of like in the plastic, some of those lines that are interesting to me. Should I paint those in? Coming up to my watery pile of water, there's a line right through the middle of this philodendron leaf, and I am not worrying about painting that variegation on there yet. I'm just trying to get the more the shapes and then the lines of the vine. I really enjoy painting liney viney things. Not everybody does. And so, you know, if you like try this and you're like, oh my God, that puzzle is like not a fun process for me, there's going to be other things that you'll enjoy. Painting that'll like fit the way that your mind puzzles out stuff. So don't try to force yourself to paint objects that you don't like. I think one of the hardest things can be not knowing what you want to paint. But if you know, for example, that you really want to paint portraits, this is a tough one, but working on self-portraits can be really useful, trying to work from pictures of yourself in a mirror versus photographs that are already laid out on a piece of paper. So I'm just keep going back to my viewpoint. When I get lost in my lines, I'm like, okay, I painted this leaf. I'm moving down to it. It meets here. And then comes out like this. I'm also looking at the negative space between this plant and the box. So I can see here that this goes like this, and this angle comes down like that, like I'm on track. This shape between here and the branching of the plant, I look for what this shape looks like. And it can really help me. It seems almost like abstracting to do that, but it helps with my perspective. So then there's the vine and the stem of the leaf, but this leaf comes up and around because things grow weird. And the way I compose this, it's going off the page. I lost that one. I would have liked it to have been in the design, but I would have had to make the box and the rest of the plant a lot smaller. I didn't really want to do that. So coming across here and wrapping around and back. So while we're studying value, we're also practicing composing or composition. And I'm just running into more leaves as I'm trying to get my branches, or not branches, stems in there. And I'm cheating on the composition, on the contour line. I'm definitely lifting my brush up. So if I catch myself doing that too much, I try to bring it back to that process, just as an exercise. And on this one, I can really see the veins of the leaf coming down, so I'm just gonna go ahead and paint that in there too. That allows the leaf not to look as flat. So I'm up here, and then there's a line that comes across because there's another leaf twisting across here. So once again, look, I'm looking at the negative space between the stems and this leaf here. And I'm kind of using that to help check myself. But it has to land here. So this little line that I made up there isn't in the right spot. Then there's this thing happening that you only can kind of get from your viewpoint. This leaf is foreshortening. It's like in front of the other leaf. And I want to encourage you, if you're working on a still life you set up for yourself and then you get halfway through it and realize that there's like some kind of perspective or like thing that's distracting you, like you can move things. It's not set in stone. You can even pinch that leaf off if it's too distracting. I haven't decided whether I want to do that yet. It's kind of a mangled leaf. It looks like something happened to it in transit, so it's not the strongest leaf in this picture. While I don't love the way that leaf looks, I like the way the stem comes across here, so I'm just trying to kind of fold it or bend it to get it to work the way I want it. That feels a little better. So now I come back to where it's at. And this leaf has a lot of variegation on it too. There's a lot of white and green. I'm not painting that in yet. That's really quite surface. That's like the surface texture. And I don't need to define that at this point. So I'm back down here thinking about how it comes off of the stem. And what this stem is coming up behind and going to this problem leaf. Problem is in challenging like a math problem. So that one, it sweeps across here. You can see the undersweep. And this is tricky. There just wasn't quite enough space for me to properly define what's going on. And it comes down, and it's coming from this kind of bunch of stems right here. So before I'm even getting to the value of this, I'm doing all this initial work on my composition. Now, behind this leaf, there is a big leaf, which is interesting for a value study because I can kind of squint and see how the leaves are relating to each other. And this leaf has a line coming through here, and because of all these leaves, I can't really see what's coming on up there. It's all blocked, and that's totally fine. So I'm coming back to here, and I'm just kind of following through to see how this part of the plant is linked in with what I painted on the bottom. And there's like a hub or an intersection here, and I'm watching for how that worked and if I managed to say everything about it that I should have. That means I've missed a spot along the way. I'm not sure it's that important. There's one more branch here. And that goes to this, and this one goes across like that. And then behind it, It's one of those right eye, left eye things where if I have both eyes open, there's another branch right behind here. If I close my right eye and open my left eye, I can see it to the left. So I'm going to go from that like squinty winky place of closing my right eye so that I can see that this branch comes across like this. And comes back. You can just see the shape of the leaf is behind here. Now, there's like partial leaves that I can see on the table back here, and this branch comes back across, and there's another one that kind of flips up like this. It's a bit of a strange perspective because I can kind of see the underside of it, but it's also blocked by this other leaf. And there's a few more back here, and there's some laying on the table here, but I'm afraid that if I paint all the information I see in, it's going to create a lot of confusion, particularly as I go into this value exercise. So I'm gonna make the educated and artistic decision not to add these few more pieces in, because I think that the representation of the plant works better with a little less information. So I've got my line work down. This is where I decided to land it, and now I'm going to spray my palette so it doesn't dry up on me.